Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahushai, Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahushai, Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahushai. First and foremost, I want to give all praises and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai. Double honors to the apostles and elders at Great Millstone that rule well, and peace and salutations to the Akim out there pushing this word in truth and sincerity. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the Brother Rai here at my first video, and what I'm going to cover today is Iranian cities hit by anti-government protests. I'm going to skip around a little bit to get to the point. Large numbers reportedly turned out in Rasht in the north and Kermanshah in the west, with smaller protests in Isfahan, Hamadan, and elsewhere. The protests began against rising prices but have sprouted into a general outcry against clerical rule, remember the word clerical, and government policies, and a small number of people have been arrested in Tehran, the capital. They were among a group of 50 people who gathered in the city square, Tehran's Deputy General for Security Affairs told Iranian Labor News Agency. The U.S. Department condemned the arrest and urged all nations to publicly support the Iranian people in their demands for basic rights and an end to corruption. All right, let's skip around a little bit. What are the people complaining about? What began as a protest against economic conditions and corruptions has turned political. Slogans have been chanted against not just Mr. Rouhani, but Supreme Leader Ayatollah al-Khamenei and clerical rule in general. Demonstrators were reportedly heard yelling slogans like "The people are begging, the clerics are act like God." Protests have been held in Qom, a holy city home to powerful clerics. There's also anger at Iran's interventions abroad, which is BS considering what the U.S. and the Saudis and Israelis are doing. In Mashhad, some chanted, "Not Gaza, not Lebanon, my life for Iran," a reference to what protesters say is the administration's focus on foreign rather than domestic issues. So what I'm going to get into with this video is that there's a good chance this is not a natural-born revolution by the people of Iran and the country against their government, but that it's actually funded by Western powers. Alright. First, I'm going to get the 1953 coup d'etat in Iran. The 1953 Iranian coup d'etat, known in Iran as the 28 Mordad coup d'etat, was the overthrow of the democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh in favor of strengthening the monarchical rule of Mohammad Reza Pahlavi on 19 August 1953, orchestrated by the United Kingdom under the name Operation Boot, and in the United States under the name Pt.1 Project or Operation Ajax. And a good book to read on a lot of topics like this is Confessions of an Economic Hitman by Jonathan Perkins. I'm going to skip around a little bit. Alright, let's get to United States' role in the issue. As a condition for restoring the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company in 1954, the U.S. required removal of the AIOC's monopoly. 5 American petroleum companies, Royal Dutch Shell and the Campagne Française des Pétroles, were to draw Iran's petroleum after the successful coup d'etat, Operation Ajax. The Shah declared this to be a victory for Iranians, with the massive influx of money from this agreement resolving the economic collapse for the last 3 years and allowing him to carry out his planned modernization project. As part of that, the CIA organized anti-communist guerrillas to fight the Two-Day Party if they seized power in the chaos of Operation Ajax. And released National Security Archive documents showed that the Undersecretary of State Walter Bedell Smith reported that the CIA had agreed with Khashoggi tribal leaders in South Iran to establish a clandestine safe haven from which U.S.-funded guerrillas, much like ISIS, and spies could operate. Alright. I'm reading a little bit myself, brother, so bear with me. Here we go. Let's start off right here. Middle East historian Dervan Abrahamian states that Iran's oil was the central focus of the coup for the British and the Americans, though much of the discourse at the time linked it to the Cold War. Abrahamian wrote, if Mossadegh has succeeded in nationalizing the British oil industry in Iran, that would have set an example and was seen at the time by Americans as a threat to U.S. oil interests throughout the world because other countries would do the same, which brings to mind the Pt.1 that Russia and China are pushing to undermine the U.S. dollar, and if they do it, which is a good chance it's going to lead to a military conflict that other countries are going to follow the same as it says here as well. I'm going to continue reading. Mossadegh did not want any compromise solution that allowed degree of foreign control. Abrahamian said that Mossadegh wanted real nationalization, both in theory and practice, much like Muammar Gaddafi, for those who remember that he wanted to create a gold dinar, much like the Petro-Yuan, to get over having to use the U.S. dollar to sell in petrol oil, and wanted to nationalize their own oil reserves through the gold dinar so they didn't have to go through the U.S. dollar. That was a little tongue twisted. Sorry about that. So from here, I'm going to go to another article called, this is from a Brookings Institute article in 2009 called Which Path to Persia? And I'm in the third chapter, which is Toppling Tehran, Regime Change. And you brothers, this is a really good thing to go through. It's about 170 pages, and I'd recommend you brothers going through it if you want to get a good understanding on situations like this, as well as Confessions for an Economic Hitman. So I'm going to skip through it a little bit to get to the point. All right. The clerical regime of Iran is brutal and corrupt, and its leaders oppose U.S. interests throughout the Middle East, which, I mean, is it really more brutal than the U.S. government, or especially Israel, and how they treat the Palestinians, which neither of them are supposed to be in that land, but for example, how they treat them by shooting kids in the head with rubber bullets with metal bits in it, which I know firsthand. Well, not me, but I had a friend in high school who was Palestinian and said him and his friend, when he would visit over there, they were throwing rocks across the border wall, and one of his cousin's friends got shot in the head with one of these rubber-covered bit bullets in the head, and it killed him. So how much brutal can Iran really be? I'm going to get back to the article. Thus, it is not surprising that some Americans have examined the regime for cracks that could be widened to bring about its downfall. The surprising ascendance of a reform movement with the 1997 election of Mohammad Khatami made a change in regime seem possible, even imminent. Not only did Khatami's widespread support suggest considerable disenchantment with the clerical regime, but his election indicated that peaceful means might lead to its replacement under the leadership of a man calling for a dialogue of civilizations. Over 10 years later, however, Khatami's conservative opponents have consolidated power. While many Iranians are cynical toward or even hostile to the regime, the reform movement is in disarray. The reform movement, however, is not only the means for changing the regime, and in theory the United States has several options, Operation Ajax, if it seeks a new Iranian government. In the past, the United States engineered a coup to restore a government of its liking there, and in recent years, Washington has supported programs designed to bolster a democratic movement in Iran. Prominent voices have also called for helping Iranian oppositionists to overthrow the regime and for using Iran's minority groups to undermine the government. There are several ways in which the United States could change the regime or undermine it. Let's go down a little bit. Supporting of popular revolutions, which any of you brothers, I may have mentioned it earlier in the video, remember the Arab Spring that happened it started in 2011, but like wildfire, it went from Egypt to, I think, then to Syria and then to Libya. But it started off with, it was so-called doctors and normal people protesting against the brutal and corrupt leaders of their government. But as you saw how it turned out, radical Islamists, which are actually just government proxies, ended up taking over these revolutions and becoming mercenaries for Western interests to overthrow that government and either put in a government more to their liking that would bend to their will, or if you brothers know about the pipeline that the Saudis and Israelis and the U.S. are working towards to go through lands in Syria to Europe to get that through. So I'm gonna get back to the article. Supporting a popular revolution, stirring up Iran's ethnic groups, or promoting a coup. In practice, these options could be pursued simultaneously and overlap in some of their elements, but it is worth considering each separately to understand their nature and requirements. This is the task of the next 3 chapters, and if you brothers want to get in that, I'd really suggest reading this. You can find it pretty easily. So now I'm going to get into some scriptures. See what I'm going to get to first. All right. First, I'm going to start with Habakkuk 2 and 5. Yeah, also, because he transgresseth by wine, he is a proud man, which you know these Edomites are, just how you deal with them in general. Neither keepeth at home, Operation Ajax to get the oil, ISIS, what happened in Libya and whatnot, who enlarges his desire is hell and is his death, which many people, hundreds of thousands of people in these lands have died just for to keep the petrodollar up or to take lands or to replace governments, and cannot be satisfied, but gathered unto him all nations and heapeth unto him all people. As you can see, when the West goes into these countries, not only do they overthrow the people in power that are not for them, they put in people that'll push through their policies that promote this Babylonian lifestyle, which have made the nations mad. Because as you can see, when you look into a lot of these countries, transgenderism is starting to get in there, the democratic kind of lifestyle and such, which I'm gonna go to another scripture, Nahum 3 and 4, because of the multitude of the whoredoms of the well-favored harlot, which is America, Mystery Babylon, the mistress of witchcrafts that selleth nations through her whoredoms, Operation Ajax, and her philosophies, and families through her witchcrafts. Now I'm going to go back to Habakkuk. Let me see. Habakkuk 2 and 6. Shall not all these take up a parable against him, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, Woe to him that increaseth that which is not his, how long? And to him that ladeth himself with thick clay. See, these nations such as Iran and Russia and China, which in the end, it could be said that they're all under the international bankers' influence, but they're just waiting for their time to shine like America is now. But they're putting up a taunting proverb with this gold-backed yuan and such, and skirting, what's the word I'm looking for? Sanctions, just completely ignoring them to go over the whore, because they don't respect it anymore. They see that America just doesn't have the juice anymore. And now I'm going to jump down to Habakkuk 2 and 8. Because thou hast spoiled many nations, all the remnant of the people shall spoil thee, because of men's blood, and for the violence of the land, of the city, and of all that dwell therein. And you can see, it could be talking about the Israelites when they come into power. They're going to spoil the rest of Edom once it's our time to get in the kingdom. But also, in my opinion, you could see it as the refugee crisis in Europe, because after those countries like Libya and Syria had been destroyed, a lot of those people went into Europe, and now they're setting up shop, which, when you hear it on the news, it's propaganda. It's not as bad as they're making it sound, but they're setting up shop. They're sleeping with the women there, taking all the benefits. They're spoiling them in effect, which, as I said, a lot of the news is not as bad as they say it is. I'm going to go back to this article on Wikipedia about Operation Ajax. news coverage in the United States and Great Britain when Mossadegh called for the dissolution